So good to see you. And if you are not the people of God, well, this is probably not the show for you. But if you want to get to know him, hang around here. We're going to talk about politics and social issues here on the Sirwalterj show. Listen, today what I want to do is go through a lot of details on history. As they often say, if you don't study your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And what I'm seeing here is a lot of repeating history, bad history, not just American history of the horrible days of old, but also European history. I see Marxism and Leninism, communism, socialism. All these things are they're dog whistles. And many of us are getting pulled into these type of systems and not realizing that it's humanism. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself, you believers who out there, you who said you are Christians, you're pulling the church into a system that is anti-Bible. It is anti-God. It is anti-morality. And so these overturnings that you're seeing in the from the SCOTUS, the left and the right are fighting over these things that seems to be overturned, or what they're seeing is that the Supreme Court justices are actually making policies. They are. It is almost impossible for them not to. So I'd like to say that for those of you who don't realize what just happened, Donald Trump overturned affirmative action. See you in 60. Bass.
It's the show that will get you thinking, and where the topics are hot. Feel free to comment whether we agree or not, 'cause he's got something to say.
Sirwalterj, Sirwalterj.
He's got something to say. Sirwalterj.
Sirwalterj.
Report live 7 days a week, always on time, but this time is not free. Sirwalterj, always on fleek. Latest trending topics, how you jumping out your seat.
He's got something to say.
Come on in. The water's fine.
Hello, everybody. Sirwalterj show. I'm here, and it is the weekend edition. Baby. How y'all is? Come on in here. The water is indeed fine. Y'all doing all right? Good. It is another Sunday afternoon. We used to call this the pandemic report. And so we want to talk about some stuff that has been going on since the pandemic. And the pandemic is, they say it's over, but COVID, he ain't over. He hanging around. I still caught COVID. Caught it 1 time, 2 times, and I believe I caught it the 3rd time. So he's still hanging around, but he's acting like a cold. And the flu. Today I want to spend some time talking about this flu system here called politics and social unrest and not understanding civics. We have 3 branches of the military. We have 3 branches of government. We focus a lot of times, most times when it comes time for voting, we focus on the executive branch, where the president of the United States, and he raises the right hand. Well, he puts his right hand on the Bible. Anyway, he puts his left hand on the Bible and raises. Anyway, and he makes this quote, and he is over the law and order. He's over the police and justice and all that good stuff. That's him. That's his job. He can veto some stuff, but that no problem. It goes back, and the boys will take care of it, whatever, so that we won't be trying to rely on a king. And over the past few years, we've had presidents that did act like a king. Now, I'm not just even talking about Trump. We've had kings. The legislative branch is the branch in whom you don't really focus on that much. We have what's called midterm elections that come up, and African Americans don't really care about them unless something is happening in Atlanta, Georgia. Then you scuffle. You quickly go down there to make sure you get your man or your woman in there because something that you saw was happening systematically, racist-wise. All right? But when you get to that judicial system right there, you don't even realize that your votes has a lot to do with what happens in the judicial part of America or of that branch. You don't really care about it. You don't study it. It doesn't matter to you. Whoever the president puts up there, take down, doesn't matter. But here's the thing. It is a domino effect because what you do initially puts someone in office affects this other office, affects this other office, and goes on and on. So if you just are voting for the general election to get a president in there, fine. You can vote for president, but then there is the electoral college who must represent a group of people. You say, well, my guy didn't get in. Did you really vote? If you don't understand what your vote does, then you will understand what happened this week with the killing of affirmative actions and as well as 2 other rulings. You will understand. So if you got a guy in there, then this guy then makes a suggestion to put someone in the Supreme Court. Can he just make a suggestion and then put the guy in? No, it has a lot to do also with you not showing up at the midterm, because then the House, the House of Representatives and the Senate must also approve. You see how this is happening? So one affects the other. Is called checks and balances. And until you know that system, why are you out there crying about what happened this week? Why are you out there marching? And here comes Black Lives Matter and all these other little subgroups that you all are part of. And you are part of the problem. You are imploding and biting the hand that's feeding you. Your hand is feeding you. So I remember in 2019, I began to give a prophetic word. The bunkers know about this. And I heard God, I heard him tell me about this is not a Joshua generation. This is not the Joshua generation, but this is really about the judges. You see, God never wanted kings. We have kings, 1 Kings, 2 Kings in the Bible, but those books would never have been in there if the people, the children of Israel, didn't want a king. Those books would not have been there. But because they saw what the other nations had, they wanted a king, and God was like, okay, I'll give them one, but here's what this king going to do to them. And the prophet told them what God said, and these people said, we don't care what he do to us. We want the king. God gave him King Saul, and Saul did a whole lot of stuff. But God protected King Saul like he did Trump, like he did all these other presidents from whom you did not like, who seemed like they were doing some horrible, detestable things, but God was giving you what you wanted. It's an imperfect will. You understand? Okay? Not imperfect will. I was talking about that yesterday. God has a will, okay? And whether he chooses it or whether he's giving it to you, nothing he does is imperfect. It's permissible, okay? Or it's perfect. So I gave this prophetic word here, and I noticed that things started happening as soon as I did it. I'm not going to play all of it, but I'll play a little bit of it here. Will it play? Right here. Know them, and then others will listen to the words, all right? I'm not known for a prophetic preacher, but God is ringing in my ear. And so we are focusing so much on the baby Jesus that Christ, the judge, the one with the sword in his mouth, is going to enter in. And you teachers need to focus more so on Christ, the judge and the lion of the tribe of Judah. So you're going to notice that people are going to be removed, and God is saying this is not a Moses generation, nor is it a Joshua generation today. Y'all are preaching about Joshua after a pastor dies, but God is also removing the Joshua generation. Is over. It's time for the judges. The judges have entered in, and God is going to use them, male and female, and God is going to judge you and your churches, and he's going to judge the nations. Oh, I hear him speaking. He's also going to utilize those who are in politics. Okay, then I'm going to give the political thing that God has told me. Now, this whole thing right here about the judges, man, it hit me so heavy. This hit me heavy, because we really wasn't hearing much about judges right before then. We didn't care about judges. And all of the rulings that has been before and precedented, we just hadn't heard anything that was so shocking to us other than when was this, 2015, when this affirmative bill, the law protecting homosexuals, all right, and giving them certain rights, blah, blah, blah. That's the only thing that have shook us up over the past 15, 20 years as far as SCOTUS is concerned. Other than that, the average African-American didn't even know anything about SCOTUSes other than the black one that was there or the notorious what's her name? She's dead now. Because she was fun. She was old, but she was fun. Other than that, you didn't even know who was the head of it. You didn't know the balance. Some people didn't even know, is it 8 people supposed to be on there? 9 people? Is it 12 people? You don't know. Okay. So when I gave that, then Trump, then these judges, right after I gave that prophetic word, these judges begin to either die or retire. And then we started seeing how policies have changed and how the American way was changing, not based off of the legislative branch per se, not so much about the executive branch per se, but them judges, as quiet as they were. Thank you, Nancy. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As quiet as they were doing stuff, and it had y'all frightened. Then you start to realize, oh, this ain't about kings and presidents and potentates, what have you. This is about judges, because God wants you to judge. The number one thing that sinners love to say to you all is, don't judge me. That is number one. Don't judge me. And the Bible is explicit on you judging. When Jesus mentioned the don't judge, he was telling you that some of you, not all of you, some of you don't qualify to judge others because you're trying to judge them with the same sickness that you have. So when a person says, don't judge me, they're telling you, leave me alone. It's my business. It's between me and God. Let me do my dirt. Jesus said, if you got something in your eye, the same thing that's in your eye may be in this other person's eye. You can't even judge. As a matter of fact, the person you judging has a smaller little twig in his eye, but you got a mote in yours. So here's what he said. We didn't go further. He says, remove the mote out of your eye first. You see, we never read part to that part. You have a right to judge once you remove this thing in your way. Remove the cataracts, then judge. And as we go further into the book and into the New Testament, we start seeing how we are able to righteously judge things so that we might even lead a peaceable life among not just the saints, but among the world, because we are praying for those potentates and kings and presidents. We're praying for them and we're interceding for them, supplications and what have you. But we can also judge a matter. We have every right. That is what the scripture says. Stop listening to these people. So going back to the SCOTUS, although SCOTUS, one job is to interpret the law, sometimes policy is inserted in the law, and sometimes it must be inserted because if they see something that the legislative has passed down, the legislative branch is already divided, and so they may say this is the law. But as times change, as people change, as the world changes, some laws must be updated. If they're not updated in the legislative branch, then the Supreme Court justice must interpret it, and then they must then tell you what to do with this interpretation, that what they're telling you may be setting in some type of law or policy to this. So you can't do this anymore. No, here's what you need to do. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to say, you can't do that. Now go back to the legislative branch, tell them to write up another bill and bring it to me. But they don't do that. So likewise, the church is to interpret the word of God just like the SCOTUS. You all are a bunch of SCOTUSes. But when we then have, what we've done was we too have turned into policymakers even in the scriptures. We've turned into the Apostle Paul as he created policies. Notice when Paul would say, he would quote from the Old Testament, he would talk about the law, he talked about the written law of Moses, and then something would happen in the New Testament church. This is something new that he would say, no, here's what you need to do. He says, now I'm telling you by permission. He said, this is not God saying this, but I went to God and God is going to back me up on this. And so what was Paul do? He was then writing a policy for the church. And then that policy became the written word of God. How do we know? Because Peter said it, that Paul was writing scripture. And then he says, Paul has given you all some very difficult things, but God Almighty is backing Paul up. You don't have the right to insert anything in the scriptures or take anything out, because the book of Revelation say that you won't even enter into the kingdom of heaven because you're putting stuff in the word and you're taking stuff out. So you're doing the same thing as SCOTUS is doing, making policies, and that is not your part. That is not your job as far as the branches of government is concerned. So the church have a lot of things in it because you all created stuff. You build churches, you put mimes and praise teams and bands in there, and flags and dancers, and you're collecting tithes, and you're doing a whole lot of things in the churches that is not in the scriptures. And then what you did was you begin to punish people for not doing those things or not adhering to the policies that you put in, and then go to the scriptures, have the nerve to go to the Constitution to say this is in the Bible, and you open it up and you are misinterpreting what the Constitution of who we supposed to live by. You're misinterpret. Can you imagine lawyers? You can't imagine because it happens a lot. Judges sitting on benches, looking at the Constitution and then just making rulings or what have you that is unconstitutional. It happens all the time. That's why stuff gets to the Supreme Court, because the lower courts are like, we can't do nothing with it, or they make a ruling that's bad, that's unconstitutional. All right. So SCOTUS wants to force the Constitution into a colorblind document. You all, if you ain't heard nothing that I said today, understand this. SCOTUS, now this is the Constitution here, wants to force the Constitution into a colorblind document. It has never, ever been colorblind. They're going to tell you that this is the letter or the spirit behind the Constitution, that they wanted all men to be created equal. We know that that's a lie. And out of their own mouths, they knew while the framers was writing this up that they went home and beat their slaves, had sex with their slaves, or did whatever they wanted to. They bought another slave. While they're talking about all men are created equal, they're saying that this is a colorblind document. It is not a colorblind document. So they were using that as an excuse to qualify getting rid of the affirmative action, and that one black man that's on the Chief Justice's, all right, is the one that people are having a big problem with. So this is an ultra conservative court. It's a 6-3 supermajority. What you're going to see is a lot of strong dissents, all right, for even more years, all right. As long as we have this type of majority, supermajority, conservative-wise, you're going to see a lot of strong dissents from the minority. Now, we know a dissent refers to at least one party disagreeing with the majority opinion. That's why you saw Jakanji, I never could say a name right, Brown, okay, and the others, and an appellate judge or the Supreme Court justice who writes an opinion opposes the holding, and that is said to is said to be writing a dissenting opinion. All right, and so they were scathing, especially against this ruling on affirmative action and these other two that I'll talk about. So it reminds me of my father. My father is a black man. You understand? The story of Lawrence Cleveland Jones Jr. taught me a valuable lesson: not to be lazy, not to have to rely on the man. They call him Charlie. You don't have to rely on Charlie for really anything. I know everybody really need the government for something, but my father did not rely on the government for the things that he knew that his own hands can build and produce and create. We were on public aid because it got really hard for him. And I remember him saying he went to the public aid office and they were trying to get my mama they were trying to sterilize my mother, can't have no more children. They were trying to remove him from the home. Y'all know the whole story of Claudine. In the 1970s, they was trying to remove black men out of the house. All right. And so he said, never again. That's it. And I remember not seeing any more public aid stamps coming to the house anymore. They were gone. So when we went to the store, my mother was pulling out that cash. I'm like, wow, what happened to the stamps? What happened to the stamps? It just disappeared because my father said, never again. I pulled myself up by my own bootstraps, and he started his construction company, and he started his code switch, and he began to learn the ways of the Caucasian man. You understand? And you have to understand that generation knew how to save. They knew how to invest. They knew how to be patient. They knew that you didn't take your check and go down there and buy the latest expensive shoes and clothes and cars. No, my father he was shrewd businessman because he watched how the white man did. He watched how the white man got over. He said, no, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to pull those resources or that knowledge and then give to my neighborhood and to my African-American brothers and to the church. And that's what he did. It came at a cost because who was it? Harriet Tubman carried a rifle, I heard, not so that she could war off the white man or the slave chasers, but she carried a rifle to point at the the slaves who was trying to pull them back into slavery. All right. So my father had to do the same thing. Blacks thrived under pressure. And this is the misunderstanding of us today. You think that it's all about systematic racism. We know that racism has held us down very long, and the white man had a head start. We get it. They built their white universities and schools and colleges, and they started their white churches. All right, and they wasn't about desegregation, and they were thriving, especially in the South. But here's the thing: African Americans were thriving as well. You just don't read about it, you don't hear about it, and a lot of times, most times, when a black man hears about how well black people were doing, you often bring up Black Wall Street, and you only bring up one place in Greenwood, Tulsa. You always bring up that one place as if there were no other places. Black people was thriving in the midst of Jim Crow. How was that possible? When after slavery, the second most hardest time for African Americans was during Jim Crow. But yet they were becoming middle class. Some of them were becoming very wealthy. In the midst of the you can't have this, you can't have that. My father had that mentality. It's called the Gilded Age. And we had a Gilded Age among African Americans, but you're not told that. Black Wall Street was a name given to Tulsa after the burning, after white people came down there and tore up all those houses and burned them down and people were dying. What did black people do? They stayed there and they rebuilt, and Black Wall Street or Tulsa or Greenwood became bigger and better after the tearing down of these jealous white folks. After. And it wasn't called Black Wall Street till after it was rebuilt. But here's the thing. The people who are trying to push you on constantly thinking about racism keeps making you feel bad about this so that there'll be strength in in numbers on trying to, they're trying to get rid of it. You'll never get rid of racism. But they always want to put you in that group and keep you in that group, because if they got you in that group, then they can control that group. Do you understand? But when you look at the footage, we talked about this the other day, of Solomon Sir Jones, the date says 1925. They burned down Tulsa in 1921. They rebuild, and then so the footage that we see now is after the rebuilding. Well, if that is true, what happened to Tulsa after that? Why is there no more Black Wall Street in Tulsa? Because of urban renewal. Number two is because of you. Black folks wanted desegregation. And then they put a highway right through town, and most of the urban cities, urban renewal came through there, and they were trying to do a good thing, but the wrong people got involved, and they were trying to clean up the slums, and they said the best way to do this is put a highway through there, and guess what happened to the mom and pop businesses? They had to shut down. You understand? This is the real history that you're not told. So the reason why so many people look like blacks are not, they're just bad, it's just worse, and it's crime, and they're poor. I mean, the spirit of poverty, and their neighborhoods are jacked. All these things are happening. This is your fault. You can't keep blaming white folks for what you doing to yourself. When you see these children in these cities terrorizing the neighborhoods, you can't blame white folks for that. You can't keep blaming slavery and post. It's a great book. I have the book, Postmodern Slave Syndrome. I agree with a lot of it, but my question is, what are you going to do about it? This mentality and this post-traumatic stress, which the system of slavery and after slavery, the enslaving of our black boys and girls by putting them in prison, because they walked across the street wrong way. So it became a different type of slavery. And then we moved into Jim Crow. But black people were living in a gilded age in that, and they were becoming wealthy. How is that possible that they're not so wealthy today, but they were very wealthy back then? Full disclosure, there are a lot of black people that are wealthy today. We have found ways to survive. We have built some wonderful buildings and businesses and commerce, and we've thrived over capitalism. You go to Atlanta, Georgia, and some of the most wealthiest places in America are right there in Atlanta, and they're all black. We have many blacks that are going to the Ivy League colleges. We can talk about that in a minute. But when you look at the consensus of all blacks, which make up a small portion of America, it's too many of them that are poor. Even though the church bring in billions of dollars a year, the church at large don't really own anything, and many of them don't even own the buildings in which they worship in. So what is that? Is that racism? You can't keep blaming redlining and greenlining and not getting loans from these white banks and there's racism in education and racism here. You can't keep blaming the white man for the things that you doing to yourself. You can't keep doing that. You are crabs in the barrel. And other people from around the world have come here, minority, and become wealthy. How is that possible? That an African comes here, and in just a few months, he got a business, he's thriving, he becomes either middle class or wealthy, and you've lived here for generations, and you keep crying about the white man. That African don't care nothing about a white man. My church is Third Islands. We got people from Belize. We got people from Haiti. We got them from Tobago, whatever. They get upset when you say the name wrong. Turks Island. We've got them from the Bahamians. We've got them from Jamaica. And none of them are crying racism. None of the islanders at my church are crying, we ain't got nothing. Every single last one of those islanders got something nice. They got homes and cars, and y'all do too. But here's the thing. Theirs are paid off. They're debt free. And they work 2, 3, 4 jobs, because y'all know that you often talk about Jamaicans. I got 7 jobs. I got 7. A job is up. I got 8 jobs. Y'all talk about them, but they are hustlers. Why? They don't care about racism in America. And this is why Africans hate your guts. Africans, y'all say that they're stuck up and sedity and they mean and angry. They're angry because they see how lazy African Americans are. And they say, how is it possible that you have nothing? And do you realize that I almost lost my life? Someone that will say, we almost lost our lives trying to cross that ocean. We had to spend, we waited years and years just to get a citizenship here. I mean, we wanted to come here so bad, and thousands of my brothers and sisters and brothers, they want to come into the land of the free, and we come in, we can't even understand how y'all don't have nothing, and we here, and then we got a business over here. Y'all keep blaming racism. You doing this to yourself. Look at the Mexicans. James McCoy says, I live near the Mexican communities, and when I drive up and down in the middle of the day, I see business after business after business after business. They're out there with their trucks, with their taco trucks, out there with their corn. The corn is the bomb, y'all. The corn. You got to come to the major cities to get that Mexican corn. All right, the Hispanic corn. It's so good. And they are thriving, and they're going into y'all's neighborhoods and buying up their property, and you got to rent from the Mexicans, the Hispanics, period. How was that possible? But you come to my neighborhood, and you drive up and down Michigan Avenue from 111th all the way to like 120th, you're going to see many businesses closed, gate closed, in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, closed. And the ones that are open are not owned by us. They're owned by who? They're owned by whites. They're owned by Asians. They're owned by Jews. And the one black bank that was on that strip got sold to another white bank down in Texas or something like that. You can't keep blaming racism for what you're doing to yourself. It's a cop-out. I'm going to prove to y'all a lot of how black people were thriving through Jim Crow. I have some books here that I've had for many years. Okay, for many years here. This is one here. This is one of my favorite books. This is an autobiography of Black Chicago. This is Dempsey J. Travis. This man was a real estate mogul. Where? Right here in Chicago. Look how thick that book is. This is him right here. All right, for those of you who are watching right now from Chicago, y'all remember him. On the south side of Chicago, King Drive. I believe that's where his office was. This was Black America, y'all. We were thriving here in the Chatham area of Chicago. Was considered like Black Wall Street. And I'm telling you, this is my father's generation, and I know they talked about racism, they talk about white folks, but it didn't bother them though, because they were movers and shakers. And I mean, it was amazing what that generation was doing here. All right. I don't know if this is out of print or not, but man, let me tell you, if you live in Chicago, if you live in any city, this right here will inspire you. Here's another one here. This is the original Black Elite, Daniel Murray. And the story of what? Forgotten Era. These are black people, y'all. This was the Gilded Age of African Americans during Jim Crow. Now, this is there's it's not illustrated, all right? It's just a lot of reading here, but it's so powerful of the things that we didn't even know was going on. I saw it. I went to some of these affairs. It was after the Gilded Age, but I was like, Uncle, how you got so much? My uncles, all my uncles, I had several uncles and aunties. They always had stuff. They didn't beg the government for stuff. They had land, and I mean, we owned so much stuff. And I was trying to figure out, I hear about all this racism and redlining and stuff like that. How was that you own so much property and land? But my generation is crying and trying to get a leg up from the government. It's just amazing to me. All right, here's another one here. I just ordered this book here. This is the Harlem Renaissance. All right, where am I? This book right here. This book right here will bless you. A Century of Images. All right, I visited Harlem when I was on my way to Harlem. I was on my way to New York when Prince. I was in the air when Prince died. And I went to go see about Harlem, man. Let me tell you, Harlem was booming. Harlem was booming, and there was one black man who was so strategic. All right? There was one black man who was like Dempsey Travis in Harlem, who was buying up properties and row homes and apartments and what have you, and he was getting white folks to move out. This one black, I'm gonna have to do a show on him. He was getting black people to move into those areas there, and these were really nice places, and he was willing and dealing and getting white folks to give up their places. All right, here, this one here is, I just got this one in the other day. This is edited by Thomas Johnson and Philip Dunn. The Black South of Richard Samuel Roberts, 1920 to 1936. True likeness. I'm telling you, y'all, this was the Gilded Age of African Americans. This is the story that y'all don't hear about. You don't even hear about it because you keep thinking about the slums and the slaves and the poor people. Everybody wasn't poor. All right? Great book, great history. They found these pictures in a home, something like that. That's how we knew about Black Wall Street in Tulsa. They found the video hidden in the basement. And they played it and they said, whoa, where'd this come from? How can that stuff be erased from history? And who did this? You can't keep blaming the white folks for that because they know their history. The Jews know their history. Hispanics know their history. Asians know their history. All you know about your history is February when you hear about the same people, from Martin Luther the King to Sojourner Truth. And that's it. You're done. This is your fault. So the SCOTUS rulings this week. I was talking about my father and how the city was hiring him because some of the buildings were not up to code. And I remember being at home and my father started this company called the Quality Construction. It was just him and my brothers. And the city would call him and say, Mr. Jones, Quality Construction? Yes. Well, listen, we got another building up the way who's not up to code, and the inspector, blah, 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 and they want you to come and fix it. This is how my father was making his business. The city knew of his quality work, and he was taking that money, and he was not only fixing them up, he was buying them. That's that baby boomer generation. It passed down somewhat to Gen X's, but we screwed it up. So the SCOTUS rulings this week is One is the student loan thing. Now, that student loan thing is hilarious to me because I knew that could not work. All right. And I think that Biden gave y'all false hope. There is no way in the world them Republicans were going to let y'all get all of them student loans wiped out. I think it's I think they capped it at $20,000 or something like that. There's no way that these Republicans was going to sit back and pay for the debt you got yourself into. There was no way. So what happened? Trump, as crazy as y'all say he was in office long enough to put in 3. And those 3, coupled with the other 2, they said, we got to kill this. That's why we're in office. Kill it. All right. So they did what they had to do. And you're just going to have to rethink about your financial situation. And you know, I like school. I'm in it right now. I decided not to get a loan because I didn't want to be part of that mess of some people owed the government these loans until they died. Many more thousands of, and maybe millions of people will die owing student loans. This other ruling is this web developer who decided to reject a gay couple based off of her religious stands, and that ruling, it's kind of funny to me. Because as they doing more research, they're saying that this was bogus because there was no gay couple. Some are saying that they checked that this website developer, she had not created not one website for anybody. All right, so that's been going around, but it don't matter. The damage has already been done. So the gays are up in an uproar over this. The funny thing about this is kind of hilarious, is that if this indeed is a true story. All right. The gays said, do the website. The Christians said, I can't do it. My Christian belief, I can't do it. The gays should have left it alone and went to another web developer. But what did they do? They went and sued her. They went and sued her, not doing their homework. And that thing got all the way up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says the Christian is correct. Why? It's a conservative dominance in SCOTUS. Not a Christian, but a conservative dominance in SCOTUS. And they said the Christian is correct. So now the gays bit the hand. Right? They went to complaining. And they lost. And so now they're afraid that discrimination is going to happen to them in other sectors. And the ruling says, no, this is not about discrimination. This is about the First Amendment right. This is her First Amendment right of freedom of speech. If they hadn't said that in the ruling, there would have been a big problem in America. They would have been marching. Well, they're out there marching now, but it's raining in Chicago, so not much marching going on. So those 2 rulings right there were kind of funny to me. You know, it is what it is. It's all political. Now, this ruling about this affirmative action. Let's go here. All right. Matter of fact, now let's talk about. I'm gonna play a video. Okay. Because this affirmative action is about the Asians. The Asians bit them, they bit the hand that fed them too. The gays did this to themselves, and the Asians did this, and it didn't just hurt gays. I mean, it didn't just hurt Asians, but it hurt African Americans. At least those who really care about going to an Ivy League school. You understand? I had to say that. This ruling is about education. It's not about employment. This is not about discrimination because you're black, so we don't have to hire you. But it's not about employment. It's not about the military, and it's not even about government contracts. They made sure they put that in the order. It's not about that. Will it turn into that? Oh, sure it will. Sure it will. Yeah, it will. The only issue here is that SCOTUS left this ruling up to public interpretation. They threw a bone at a dog pack. It did. They said that this is about education, especially towards Harvard and that other Ivy League school. But then they left a lot of holes. And that holes caused us, the public, to try to interpret it. So they're going to have to revisit this in the legislative branch and the executive branch as well. So the Students for Fair Admissions brought this case on behalf of the Asians. You understand? So I do have some videos that I do want to play here. All right. So grab some coffee, tea, your favorite drink, pop some popcorn. We're going to do some studying up and down YouTube. All right. So Clock Keeper, we may be going long. I know we're going long tonight. Gonna watch some stuff because I don't feel like revisiting this again. All right. So I'm just this is a masterclass on affirmative action. All right, so let's visit some YouTube videos that I've done the homework for you, and I'll play some of the highlights so that y'all can see that these people here, most of these people are obviously maybe a liberal, Democrat on the left, but they bring in some great points. When you're doing your study, don't just study one side. Don't just watch MSNBC and CNN. All right, you need to watch conservative media as well as liberal media. You got to watch them both to get both sides. You all are stuck on one thing and then you get pulled in. I'm going to tell you the danger. Towards the end of this teaching, I'm going to tell you the danger of only watching one type of one source of media. Because when you do that, you find yourself becoming robots. All right, so let's go to the top here. This is MSNBC here.
An AAPI interest.
All right.
You're absolutely right. He is using Asian Americans as a political wedge. Frankly, after the Fisher case in which he lost before the U.S. Supreme Court, one of the things that he started saying was going around saying, I need to find Asian plaintiffs. His
okay, let me go back.
In this kind of right-wing extremism.
This guy here.
And John, I want to start off with you because this guy, Ed Blum, he is heading the Students for Fair Admissions, this group suing over the affirmative action case. But he's really just positioning Asian American people against other people of color. He's got an ugly history in this kind of right-wing extremism. How exactly is this guy in a position to represent AAPI interests?
You're absolutely right. He is using Asian Americans as a political wedge. Frankly, after the Fisher case in which he lost before the U.S. Supreme Court, one of the things that he started saying was going around saying, I need to find Asian plaintiffs. His modus operandi is not to serve the Asian American community, but to use us as this political wedge to try to divide us with the African American and Latino community.
And that's exactly what has been happening always in American history. You understand? Using minorities and pin them against each other. And it's like y'all didn't know that because the number one person that has been used to get black people to do right. Matter of fact, let me ask y'all that question since there's a whole bunch of y'all here. Who in our community has always been used since slavery to get you black folks to do right? Can you tell me? Who? Put in the comment section. Who? And still to this day, that person is being used to divide and conquer and do the bidding of the government to get y'all to act right. All right. Johanna got it. Tamika got it. Simone got it. All right. No, Mary. No. All right. Who? Nope. No, April, not April. Nope, not the Jews. No. No, Rain. Nope, not black women. But let me say you part right, Raina. Most of you got it right. Preachers, pastors. They have been using pastors and preachers since slavery. Now, the Democratic Party is dominated by black women. But do black women really have a voice in the Democratic Party? See, you've got to see this. When you don't see it, you'll never see it. Black women make up the majority of the Democratic Party. But do they have the influence over the Democratic Party or in the Democratic Party? Uh-oh. All right, let's go back.
As you showed in that initial graphic, Asian Americans actually support affirmative action. About 70% of our community support affirmative action. So this notion that somehow we are going to suffer, the Asian American community will be harmed by these race-conscious programs is just a fallacy. It's just a fiction.
It is indeed a fiction, and the data bears out, like we said, that most people in the API community support this. Dr. Tolson, my friend, making your cross-connection debut. And not only are you a professor at Howard, shout out HU, I know everybody loves to see you here, but you were also President Obama's former executive director of the White House Initiative on HBCUs, so you're uniquely keen to talk on, to speak about affirmative action and the consideration that it takes on college admissions. This guy successfully gutted voting rights. I mean, he was a part of that initiative. So the fact that this is going before a conservative court, it's not unreasonable to think that affirmative action could be gone in college admissions. What's the long-term impact if affirmative action is struck down by the Supreme Court?
And I'm also the director of education for the NAACP, and we released a statement saying that we were disturbed by this development in the Supreme Court. The estimates are that the black population at Harvard University could drop to half if this were to go through. And one thing that's important is that these are highly qualified students. These students statistically, they are identical in their graduation rates to Asian and white students. They have the black and Latino students at Harvard University have a 96% graduation rate.
Did y'all see that?
For them to target this group, and after the federal investigation, Operation Varsity Blues, which exposed all of these inequities and non-merit students who are coming in, mostly white, and for them to target black and Hispanic students, I think is quite appalling.
96% graduation rate, African Americans and Asians at Harvard. I'm gonna tell y'all something, man. This thing is kind of difficult. All right, I'm gonna give you some more stats because I'm gonna tell you something. Affirmative action, who cares? Affirmative action, we care. It depends on who you're talking to, who's in there right now, how they get in there, who's trying to get in there right now. So we can't say I don't care about affirmative action because typically 70 to 80% of Americans don't even go to college. So this is really about those who are in another bracket, who feel that academia is very important. I feel that academics is important because that's why I'm in school now. I'm gonna be in school for years to come. All right, I made a career just staying in school. Okay, but here's the thing: a person who goes to a high school in my neighborhood, who is salutatorian, who cum laude la boo boo, all right, all these wonderful things. He is a scholarly student, A student, honor roll. He graduated with all A's. Who is leaving the high school in my neighborhood, and then you go to the prominent neighborhood up north. All right, where you've got a white kid who's at one of those upper class neighborhood, posh neighborhoods, or where the taxes on the homes are much higher, but it supports the school system there, so they have a lot of the AI and computers and better books and everything else. This student got the same grades as the one in my neighborhood. Straight A, scholarly, cum laude, all that stuff. You take those two students who had two of the same types of curriculums. And unfortunately, you put those two kids in Harvard, and if they both are accepted in Harvard, the black kid may struggle if he make it. The white kid would thrive. Why? It's not about A's. It's not about how scholarly they were in their school. It has everything to do with the school itself. One of the reasons why affirmative action was bad for a lot of blacks is because it was almost like they were allowing and to some extent forcing black kids who had good grades to go to these schools, and the speed was too fast. And one of the SCOTUS said putting these blacks in lower tract. Remember him? What was his name? Alito? Peed off black folks because he talked about you may have to put this kid in a slower track school. He was actually correct, kinda, because this guy got all A's and his neighborhood school didn't prepare him for Harvard, but that white kid who got the same A's prepared him for Harvard. So the problem is not matching this black student with the right higher education, with the right institution. You understand? You just want to go to Harvard because you want that name brand on your clothes. But I'm not going to wear a starter jacket in the 1990s. I mean, that was the stuff, a starter jacket. But I couldn't wear a starter jacket in my neighborhood because they was robbing us. They were beating us to a pulp to grab our starter jackets. No, you had to go up north to wear a starter jacket. Or you had to go down south somewhere. All right? So that's the same thing in this situation here. Affirmative action has hurt a lot of black students because they were putting people in there based off of quota, and those students were failing, or they found it very difficult to be in that school just because they were scholars at their school, but the school didn't prepare them. So what you should have done was matched him or her to the right institution. You understand? Match him or her to the right institution. Then this person can continue being a scholar at a slower track than Harvard. You got to compare it. You got to say it right. Alito said it wrong. That's what got him in trouble. Not a slower track, period. No, compared to Harvard, a slower track. Y'all understand what I'm saying? He wasn't prepared for the real world like that. The white kid was, because the school was in a place where he could handle it because that school prepared him for Harvard. Scalia, yeah. His suggestion that African Americans would fare better at schools that are, yes, less advanced. There it is. I knew it. That was him. And y'all went all for him, and the man was correct. Not for all blacks, because African Americans are very, very extremely smart and intelligent, what have you. Notice what he said here, that 90% of the blacks at Harvard graduated. So they were picking them just right. They were picking them just right. But when you talk to, I studied Thomas Sowell a lot, all right, and he graduated from Harvard. He taught at the Ivy League schools, and he talked about how many of them that you don't talk about who did not make it through Harvard because they grabbed them, put them into a school that was too fast for them. They qualified to be in an Ivy League, but just not Harvard. y'all understanding? So here's another one. This is Judge Joe Brown. Sometimes you've got to put the beep button on him. She began to give some stats. Judge Joe Brown and Dana gave some wonderful stats here.
And that's what they told me. I said, why do you want me in? Well, you can get in the front door. We want to set up an affirmative action program to bring in more minorities so our students mainstream will be exposed to them and vice versa.
All right. So right now, Harvard undergraduates, right? The student body, 39.6% are white, 27.5% are Asian, 10.8% are Hispanic, 9.3 African American, 2.2
Yeah.
Native, 10.6% mixed. So this is the thing why it's going to backfire, because the Asian students were complaining that they were being overlooked for a Black person or a Hispanic person, but you make up 27% of the population at Harvard, way past African Americans. That's only 9.3%. Also, Harvard has a legacy admissions that makes up 43% of the student body at Harvard are legacy students. We're talking about generational wealth, generations. They're all. So this is not.
Yes. Legacy students. Whites will always get in. My daddy went here, all right, or we made a large donation. All right, the SCOTUS is not going to mess with that at all. All right, now that's up to the college discretion, who, legacy-wise. But affirmative action, no, that has always been the big fight. So, yes, that has everything to do with race. But now I want y'all to see something here. Let's talk about Clarence Thomas, shall we? All right. This is MSNBC here. Okay. Which one do I want to play? Now, this brother did an amazing piece on him. Where is it? I'm looking for it. Okay, right here. Look at this.
Good evening.
Okay, this is called Clarence Thomas Pull the Ladder Up Behind Him. All right? Pay close attention to Clarence Thomas' history. All right? So Roger said, do I have to? And Nancy, I'm going to play Joy Reid's story as well. All right? So y'all buckle up. This right here is when the left get it right on how to analyze the situation. I don't always agree with the left, because again, towards the end, I'm going to tell y'all why I can't agree with the left on everything. I agree with the right and the left. That's why I'm a moderate. But here, the history of this man, I knew it was something going on, but I followed those hearings when they talked about the pubic hair and on the coke. What's the name? Who was trying to get him not to be seated. And your current president right now, Joe Biden, was the one on that panel who was making sure they push him in there. All right. So check this out. Great reporting.
From New York, I'm Chris Hayes. Today, in a landmark ruling that overturns decades of precedent, sweeps aside generations of arguments about racial justice and inequality, the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, 6 conservatives to the 3 liberals, effectively got rid of the use of race in college admissions at all, even for the purposes of increasing diversity. In the wake of the decisions, many colleges and universities immediately sent letters to students and alumni outlining how they're going to operate going forward. One such school was the College of the Holy Cross in Massachusetts, which is notable because that is the alma mater of Justice Clarence Thomas, whose decades-long project to destroy affirmative action culminated in a victory today. Now, Thomas did not write the court's majority opinion. That was written by Justice Roberts. But he did write a fiery 58-page concurrence denouncing race as a factor in admissions as policies that, and I quote him here, fly in the face of our colorblind Constitution and our nation's equality ideal. Clarence Thomas did not always think this way. In the late 1960s, when he was at Holy Cross, he was one of just a few dozen black students at that college. As Joel Anderson writes for Slate, quote, he got admitted thanks to his good grades and a recommendation from a nun, and maybe in part because the school was actively looking for black students. It was the 1960s. It was in the wake of the Watts riots. The school had not had many black students, and it went out looking for some. And once he got to Holy Cross, well, Thomas's politics there were downright radical.
He definitely was inspired by the Black Panthers. He dressed like them. He talked like them. He had a beret, he had army fatigues, and he had the army boots.
He wore an afro. He was out there with everyone else.
After completing his undergraduate degree, Thomas was accepted at a number of prestigious law schools, including Harvard, but he chose to attend Yale Law because he believed the campus's liberal politics best aligned with his own. While there, however, Thomas became disillusioned with his own status at that elite university. As the New York Times reported back in 1991, Thomas was accepted to Yale as part of the school's explicit affirmative action plan to admit more students of color. But he resented any suggestion that he received any special consideration because of his race. And once he graduated from Yale Law, Thomas blamed his initial inability to find work in the legal profession not on the fact that many legal institutions and law firms in the 1970s were still redoubts of racism and white supremacy and had racist hiring practices and did not want to hire him, but rather on the belief that his degree had been tainted by the implication of affirmative action.
He had his Yale law degree and he had a 10-cent stamp stuck to it. You know, like a 10-cent price tag stuck to it. Because he's like, yeah, this is what it's worth, right? 10 cents, right? No more.
He came to blame affirmative action for the rejection he felt.
Now I knew what a law degree from Yale was worth when it bore the taint of racial preference. I was humiliated and desperate.
Eventually, Thomas found a job in the office of the conservative Missouri Attorney General John Danforth, who recently told the Slow Burn podcast that he hired Thomas in part because of his race.
My ambition was that the AG's office was to be the best law office in the state. Now, did I also think that it was important to have a diverse office? Yes, I did. And did I think that it would be wonderful to hire Clarence Thomas for that reason? Yes. But the most important reason was I had to get the job done.
From there, Thomas' star continued to rise in conservative legal circles, a rise that, according to his ex-girlfriend, was again predicated in part on affirmative action.
In 1982, the White House offered Thomas a big promotion, the chance to run his own federal agency. The trouble was, that agency was the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This was exactly the kind of role Clarence Thomas didn't want, a position focused on race and discrimination.
He didn't want to be there. He was resentful that he had not been offered something that a white person would want.
Thomas was in a bind. He wanted to keep rising in the administration, but he didn't want to rise this way.
He didn't want anyone to think that he had gotten a job because he was black. Of course, every job he had ever gotten was because he was black.
Now, I want to be absolutely clear here. No one is saying that Clarence Thomas was unqualified for any of the long list of jobs. Even his critics, his harshest critics of his jurisprudence, will concede, can concede, that he is undoubtedly one of the most, if not the most, important and influential legal minds of his generation. But that mistaken belief that race-based consideration, diversity-based consideration, and some elusive concept of true merit abstracted from that are mutually exclusive is the foundational lie on which today's Supreme Court decision was built. It was that belief, however, that helped secure Thomas's legal legacy. Thomas was eventually appointed to the D.C. Court of Appeals by President George H.W. Bush, and just 2 years later, Bush nominated him to the Supreme Court to replace the retiring Justice Thurgood Marshall, at that point the only black person to ever sit on the nation's highest court.
The president called Thomas the best qualified person for the job and denied that he selected Thomas to replace the retiring Thurgood Marshall because he's black.
And the fact he's minority, so much the better. But that is not the factor, and I would strongly resent any charge that might be forthcoming on quotas when it relates to appointing the best man to the court.
Again, same thing here. Thomas was both qualified for the position on the court, as were probably several dozen folks, maybe more. He was also nominated due to the obvious political motivations in replacing the nation's first black Justice Thurgood Marshall. During his confirmation hearings, Thomas was asked about his own vocal opposition to affirmative action.
The question is directly in entry to Yale. Were you part of an affirmative action quota? Were you part of a racial quota in terms of entering that law school?
Senator, I have not during my adult life or during my academic career been a part of any quota. The effort on the part of Yale during my years there was to reach out and open its doors to minorities whom it felt were qualified. and I took them at their word on that. And I have advocated that very kind of affirmative action.
Just think about that moment for a second, right? Now, having seen some of this man's trajectory in his bio, right? The thing he hates more than anything, that wounds his pride, that enrages him, is to be viewed as being less than or not qualified, as being an affirmative action case. And yet at every key juncture in his life, he's asked about it over and over again. And for Thomas and the conservative majority in the court, it all boils down again to this nebulous concept of merit, of qualified, who is deserving of opportunities and who's not. But I think that misses the point. It's really a question about what kinds of institutions and really what kind of society we want to have. Do we want a society in which people like Clarence Thomas, from the small town of Pinpoint, Georgia, just several generations removed from slavery and Jim Crow, are selected, nurtured, and encouraged, or ones in which they don't go to Holy Cross, and they don't go to Yale, and they don't end up in the courts? And instead, those schools and those institutions pick more sailing team members and legacies. One of the things we saw today, and we saw a lot, we're going to talk about it, was a brilliant man who was able to overcome centuries of institutionalized prejudice, who was able to come from the most unlikely of backgrounds, with the help of a system designed to accomplish just that, turn around and pull the ladder up behind him.
Turn around and pull the ladder up behind him. His whole life was predicated around, I'm not black. I'm not black. You can't, like my grandson do this. He gone. He disappeared. He's here now. That's what that's what this man did. His whole life was trying to erase this thing off of his bones, off his skin. He's in the bathroom doing this. It's a curse. So he has been trying to kill affirmative action. The very thing that got him in there, he's trying to kill it, because, and notice all his pictures is him mean mugging. Now, Joy Reid, is that her name? I want y'all to listen to her because she is bona fide. Can't nobody talk about Harvard better than she can. All right. Now, I didn't attend Yale, but I visited Yale. I spoke at Yale. I did my research before I spoke. That's the bunkers know. Y'all have heard my speech. And I did research on it, and I walked the campus. One of the professors walked me up and down the campus and showed me their history, and I was blown away how black people even got there. And I stumbled upon the history of the one black man who was not allowed in the class, but he had to stand outside the classroom, and they said, you can't sit in here because of Jim Crow, but you can, just visit and listen. And he listened and he visited and he kept coming to class, and that young man graduated from Yale, first African American to do it. And I talked about that there because I was honoring Dr. Comer, who was a multi-book author, and he was breaking all the rules as a black man there at Yale. So I was honoring him in my speech, and as I did my homework, I was really blown away at how affirmative action assisted someone like Brother Justice here. And then he turns around and deny it. I had to be very careful in my speech because there's some things I wanted to say about Yale in it, but I didn't want to mess up Comer's day because they were honoring him with a portrait that they were going to put on the wall. So I didn't want to mess that up. So I wanted to so bad to bring the Sirwalterj Jones show to Yale University. The president was sitting there, and I said, you know what? I'm looking at this white man's eyes, and maybe he's expecting me to do a song and dance. There won't be no singing here, brother. No, where's your piano? No, there won't be no singing here. I'm gonna tell you all the truth from the outside. Look at this joy here. Okay, her story right here. I told y'all it's gonna be it's gonna be long.
Reed is the host of The Readout right here on MSNBC, a graduate of Harvard University, the defendant in today's ruling, and she joins me now. Roy, first, Joy, let me first just get your reaction to the ruling, which I think we all suspected was coming. But given that it is your alma mater, I know you've been watching it closely.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to what happened today?
And I will say I'm also very, very proud of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who I was privileged to know at Harvard University, one of the most brilliant human beings I've ever met and had a chance to know. And her dissent, I thought, was scathing and perfect. So, I was not surprised because Clarence Thomas has been on a mission to dismantle every institutional attempt to help and aid not just Black people, but any people who have been disadvantaged in this society since he's gotten on the court. He, like Samuel Alito, appears to operate from a kind of rage, a sort of cold rage against the entire 20th century, the second half of the 20th century, which they find to be an affront to their own self-image and to their image of America as this country that is noble and that has always been noble and whose slave-holding founders were noble and really hated slavery and were just so pained at the fact that they had to own all these people and that their wealth was derived from owning these people, but really they were good-hearted, and that's kind of what his concurrence discusses. But what I find fascinating is what you put forward, and I'm going to now have to watch that whole front line that you just showed a piece of. Because let's just be clear, Clarence Thomas was born in Pinpoint, Georgia. He is of the Gullah extraction. Yep. He didn't even speak English until he was 7 years old. He spoke the Geechee tongue and was so afraid to speak in front of white people because he was always told, don't speak Geechee in front of white people because it would embarrass you, that he almost never spoke at all. Mm-hmm. There was a nun, a white nun, whose largesse helped get him through school and get him those good grades. He has been assisted by white patrons, really his whole life, even now by very rich ones as they fly him around the country. And to your very point, he seems to deeply resent all of the assistance he got, and he wants to make sure that nobody like him ever gets that kind of help again, because it helps his self-image so that he can lie to himself and fool himself and maybe hate himself a little less for having gotten help all along his path to the Supreme Court. And let's be clear, the most important thing to know about his confirmation, other than the fact that he's accused credibly of sexual misconduct, is the polling that got him over the line. And it was the polling that I very much remember. I was one of the few Black folk who was against him. It was the polling that showed that about 7 in 10 Black people supported his ascension to the seat once held by the great Thurgood Marshall, and he is not his equal. It was Black people's support that got wavering members of that Judiciary Committee
Democrats,
and wavering senators.
They needed Democratic votes. It was a Democratic majority. That's why Joe Biden is in those hearings running. They needed the Democratic votes.
And it was only Black people's support in those polls that got wavering Democrats to vote for him. And he has repaid Black people with scorn ever since.
Let me ask you a follow-up question about the pathos here, because by the way, the front line that we played clips of and Slow Burn, both about Clarence Thomas's trajectory, I cannot recommend them both highly enough. They're just exquisite pieces of journalism, and the story is fascinating. I mean, he's really one of the most interesting figures in American life. I really believe this in terms of that trajectory. I mean, there's a moment in Slow Burn where Joel Anderson, who's the fantastic host, and the academic Leah Wright Rigueur, who wrote a great book about Black conservatives, they're talking about their own experience in elite white-dominated institutions, right? Of that kind of that feeling, that suspicion, okay, from white folks.
Let me pause here because I'm looking at the comment section. You all are talking about Ketanji Brown Justice, about she didn't know what a woman is, and I like what Henry Roth says, and about they asked her what is I'll get back to this in a minute about what is a woman. Henry Roth is correct. She knew the answer. She just didn't want to give the wrong answer no matter what it is. He is absolutely right. She could not. This is the whole point of this show here. So I'm glad you brought it up. I think it was Mona brought it up. This is the whole point of today's show, of knowing how they think. The Supreme Court justices were put in office. Depending on the party that put them in, they must represent the party that put them in. Anybody who tell you that the Supreme Court justices are non-politics, non-political, is lying to you. Anyone who tells you that the Supreme Court justices are up there to help the American people for moral reasons is lying to you. This is all about bipartisanship. You understand? So she could not tell this person, the senator or the congressman, whoever that was to ask her the question, was a woman. She could not tell the truth. She knew what a woman was because she's a woman. She was born one. She got all woman parts. She could have analyzed that thing scientifically, medically. She could have went up and down and told and convinced them what a woman was. She could not. And that she wasn't even expecting. She wasn't prepared for that question. So she paused and then she deflected and then she went over here and over there. Now, we knew she was going to get in, but she couldn't. Why? For the same reason why these who are on the conservative side of SCOTUS having to rule on the way they are with these other things that they have always been put in to get rid of these things. Abortion is bad. Abortion should have been overruled years ago. Should have never been in there. But years ago should have been. But we were waiting for Trump, Trump to get in office, so that he can get his people in there to get rid of abortion. All right? Roe versus Wade should have been gone. Here's the problem with the deception of African Americans and Christians. Be careful, because even though you know a ruling is morally right, even though you know that a ruling is morally right, because it's from the wrong people, meaning someone you disagree with, you get upset with it. To the point where you find yourself being a part of the mob mentality and don't even know it. You know as a Christian that abortion is wrong. You know good and well, but you come up with little ways of saying, but this is my body. Men should not be involved in a woman's body. I have some of y'all was even saying silly stuff like, I'm both pro and I'm both. You are a freak of nature. You are unstable as water. You are literally telling everybody that I'm both bitter and sweet. I'm both bitter and I'm sweet. There's no way Jesus would be agreeing with what Christians are saying about abortion today. Whatever means necessary to kill this thing, because y'all are killing. So let's kill this thing. He would not be, I'm pro-life, yet I'm pro-choice. There's no way Jesus would be pro-life, pro-choice. But because you don't like those people, the enemy of mine enemy is what? In the Sour Patch Kids. You understand what I'm saying? It's amazing what Christians would do and flip and agree with something that's immoral because they are against a particular party. Y'all are doing that to yourselves. So the enemy of mine enemy is my friend.
Oh, you're an affirmative action case. Now, in Thomas's case, that it's a defining anger of his life. Mm-hmm. But it's also real. And I feel a little weird as a white person being like, I don't want to say that what Thomas experienced was in any way not legitimate. I think he comes by it honestly. But I'm curious how you think about it and you think about that sort of coded racism that comes in those institutions and circumstances, and what it means for the broader question of whether we should have it constitutionally.
Well, let me just be clear. I got into Harvard only because of affirmative action. I went to a school no one had ever heard of in Denver, Colorado, in a small suburb. I didn't go to Exeter or Andover. I didn't have college test prep. I just happened to be really nerdy and smart and have really good grades and good SAT scores. But someone came to Denver, Colorado to look for me. A Harvard recruiter flew to Denver, and I met up with her at the Village Inn restaurant and did a pre-interview to get to pull me into Harvard. I was pulled in, and the schools like Harvard and Yale that I got into affirmatively.
Yes.
And it was literally not saying we're going to take an unqualified person and put them in Harvard. Yes. We're going to take a very qualified person who we would never know existed and put them in Harvard. That's how I got there. That's how Ketanji got there. That's how Justice Jackson, I should say. Justice Jackson got there. It's how Clarence Thomas got there. Right. But the minute I arrived from my majority black little town, Montbello in Denver, to Harvard, the first week or two that I was in class, my presence was questioned by white people. I was in this big conference class where some white students stood up and said, those students, the black students, they're only here because of affirmative action. It became a huge argument that we all ended up having. This was freshman year. I had never had my academic credentials questioned. I had never had anyone question whether I was intelligent until I got to Harvard. And it was a defining point of my experience there. It's why I really was one of the many reasons I was miserable there my freshman year. Yeah. You felt completely out of place, and people keep telling you shouldn't be here. And yet, some of the people I went to school with were far less smart than me or the other black folk there. They got in because their daddy and their granddaddy. I went to school with somebody whose name was on one of the buildings. You're going to school with people whose names are on the buildings, who are third and fourth generation legacies, whose parents pumped money into Harvard to get them in. But that affirmative action is okay with this majority. They said that the people who benefited from slavery, their descendants, who are so far ahead of black folk in terms of opportunity that we'll never catch up to them. I don't care how many Oprahs we get. Those people's affirmative action is A-okay because those people can pay for fancy trips for them. Yeah. But you people who want to get in just because of your brains, but you're not from a legacy, too bad. You can't come in.
We're out of time, but I would commend people to read the JFK admissions.
Let me tell y'all, man. Legacy. She's right. And I don't always agree with Joy. Those white people have benefited from affirmative action. They have always benefited from affirmative action. Black people didn't know it. You just didn't know it. Because it wasn't because it's a bird of a different feather. It's what's in the name. It's States' Rights, the show I did, on the that show I did about what's his name? My mind is all over the place. Yeah. So when a person is right, I'll agree with them when they're right. I won't agree with them in total, but I agree with the points here. I have to watch MSNBC and CNN with glasses on and sitting up and paying close attention, because if I sit back and close my eyes and listen to them, I'm going to find myself getting pulled in to liberal ways, immorality, inclusion, affirming stuff that is unbiblical. I find myself getting pulled in. So you've got to watch it with your gates open. Come on, Brother McCoy. Deception will creep in if you're not careful. I feel the same way about conservative media, the same way. Same way. You cannot watch one source and then get it. Be careful, or you're going to find yourself wondering, how did I get to this place? All right. Now, y'all do your homework here. There's some other videos here that I can't play in its totality because they're just as long as these others that I just played. They're 8 and 9 minutes, so they're not long. But this one right here, affirmative action versus race neutral admissions. This is good, from the Wall Street Journal.
For more than 50 years, colleges have taken different approaches towards admissions to make their campuses more diverse. Considering an applicant's race, generally called affirmative action, has long been standard at universities from UPenn to Harvard, but not anymore. The Supreme Court has ruled that no college in the U.S. can consider an applicant's race in admissions. 9 states have already banned this practice. California did almost 25 years ago. Just enough time for a detailed study on its consequences.
Once you have the data set in hand, there's an awful lot you can learn, honestly, pretty quickly, right? Basically what I'm doing is just differences in means. What happened to the kids after 98? What happened to the kids before 98? Just those comparisons tell you an awful lot about not just what happened in California, but I think what we can expect to happen across the country.
And this is something that a lot of people didn't know, that California had affirmative action for over 20-some years. Boy, there's no way to go back to it because it affected African Americans in a bad way. Again, it depends on where you're trying to go, and do you even need affirmative action? All right. This chart here that I wanted to show, right here. This is how they base it on leadership, recommendations, life experience, awards, essays, extracurricular activities, SAT scores, blah, 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 and then race. This is where the Asians are complaining right here. Right here, because they fail on several of these. They fail. They have the highest SAT scores and essays, but they fail on some other things here, and I'll go to that video.
Exactly.
Let's go. Let me see. Right here. Vox did a great thing on what we get wrong about affirmative action. And they bring up this man here. Let me see. Where is he? That guy right there. He changed the whole trajectory.
And there are 2 simple reasons why. One reason we suck at talking about affirmative action is because many of us don't actually know what it is. It was originally a way for colleges and universities to give special consideration to racial minorities to help undo the effects of past discrimination.
Past discrimination.
And for many schools, it meant setting aside a certain percentage of their seats for minority applicants, including the University of California, Davis Medical School. But that changed in 1978 because of this man, Alan Bakke. Bakke was rejected twice by the UC Davis Medical School, so he filed a lawsuit. Back then, the school reserved 16 of the 100 seats for minority students in an effort to remedy past discrimination. It was a quota. Bakke argued he had higher academic scores than several minority students who were accepted. And in 1978, the Supreme Court sided with Bakke. The court said the school couldn't use quotas to racially balance the student body, and that they couldn't consider race to remedy past racial discrimination. The reasoning? Justice Lewis Powell wrote that societal discrimination is not a valid reason for considering race. So Bakke was admitted to UC Davis and became a doctor.
97 medical students graduated there today, among them Alan Bakke.
But his case didn't end affirmative action. It just redefined it. Here's the rest of Justice Powell's decision.
The only state interest that fairly may be viewed as compelling on this record is the interest of a university in a diverse student body.
So university administrators could no longer use affirmative action to address past discrimination, but they could use it to create a diverse student body. And to be fair, diversity is beneficial to everyone.
And that's where the problem is. Remember I said earlier that they created a problem and they put it back into the hands of the people to give a public interpretation. And you can't trust, we can't always trust ourselves. So I'm going to fast forward to where the Asians come in to play here. Here's the problem where the Asians are affected by this.
Harvard is discriminating against Asian Americans.
A group of about 60 Asian organizations is suing Harvard University.
At issue is whether the university imposes a cap on the number of qualified Asian American students that it admits.
But Harvard's argument is essentially that the Supreme Court says that we can use race in admissions to diversify our campus.
Harvard assigns each applicant something called a personal score to measure subjective things like kindness, courage, and leadership. And Asian applicants are scored lower on that metric than white applicants. Meanwhile, on the academic metric, Asian applicants tend to score higher than white applicants.
Like I said.
So the plaintiffs argue that since Asians have better academic profiles, Harvard is using this personal score to balance out the number of Asians they get, which is ultimately a fancy racial quota. But in this chart, you can see that the share of Asian students varies a lot from year to year. If Harvard had a quota, you'd expect that share to stay the same. But even if Harvard wins its case, affirmative action opponents hope that this case will eventually go to the Supreme Court, a body that's recently become more conservative.
So as you can see, that this is 4 years old. So they knew 4 years ago what was going on. It was discriminating against Asians, not based off of their race, but based off of these other factors that I show y'all in that wheel there, that they could not. They come from, from China, from Japan, from other Asian territories, and they don't have these things that the Americans have that build up. So, but their scores really high. But we can't bring you in just based off of your scores. You have to qualify the whole spectrum, and it didn't. So they felt that was unfair, and so this is why they came together and did what they did, and it is backfired. They will feel the brunt of this, and actually more Asians were for affirmative action than against it. So those Asians who got this thing overturned is hurting their Asian brothers and sisters. It's going to hurt them in the long run, and it not only is going to hurt them, those Asians are going to hurt African Americans, again, who want to go to Ivy League. Again, that's a whole nother crew of people that it wasn't like I woke up every morning saying, man, one of these days I'm going to go to Ivy League. If they had accepted me, fine, no problem. But I never woke up and said, man, one day I'm going to go to an Ivy League school through affirmative action. It didn't matter to me, but that's just me. Okay, so there's a difference between moral law and human decency. The First Amendment is anti-Bible. You'll never hear a man say that. You all. The First Amendment is anti-Bible. You're like, what? What kind of fool are you? It is. There's a difference between now. Come close. This is where I'm bringing y'all towards the end as quick as I can, so y'all can hear my analogy here, because y'all know I'm different. Sirwalterj Jones is extremely different. There's a difference between moral law and human decency. The Constitution is not a moral law. It is rooted around some human decency, and then there's a whole lot of stuff that was there. That's why it took them so long to get to the 13th and 14th Amendment, because it didn't start off with human decency for all. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endued by all these wonderful things. Well, they were talking to a nation that they ran from, because those colonizers were putting this grip on them and taxes and telling them what they can do in these colonies here. And so that was a white man's fight against the white man. So that was human decency. But the First Amendment is anti-Bible, because it's talking about freedom of speech. The Bible is our Constitution, and you are not free to say whatever you want to say. As a matter of fact, the Bible tells you to bridle your tongue and be quick to be quiet, slow to speak and quick to hear. A whole page in James chapter 3 talked about the tongue is an unruling evil, a deadly poison. Who can know this thing? I mean, it's like you can turn a whole ship. The captain would turn a big old ship any way he will, and a man will put a bit in a horse's mouth and turn that big old head wherever he will. But the tongue is poison. That is against the First Amendment. And the freedom of religion is against the Constitution of God. You do not have a right to choose whoever you want to choose in religion. The scriptures say, choose ye this day. All right. So in essence, you have a right, but the end result is you are going to die. So do you want to take the right to choose, yet that law which gives you the right also punishes you? So do you have the right? Do y'all understand what I'm saying? The Constitution gives you rights, and the government cannot punish you based off of those rights that you have freely received and executed those rights, right? The Bible gives you the right to choose, but if you choose wrong, you will be punished for it for eternity. Is that a right? Is that a right? As a matter of fact, the writer of the Constitution of God, which is God, he said, choose good, choose evil, but choose good. Here's evil, here's good. He said, now choose good. So the writer says, here's what you need to do in order to obtain eternal life. Are y'all still with me? So the First Amendment is anti-Bible, yet evangelicals thrive on it. And they thrive on the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. Jesus said, if you live by the sword, guess what? Man, I'm killing myself because I'm getting people that's so upset with me. So we now obey God's law of righteousness. That is not the Constitution of America. It is based off of protecting humanity through human decency, yet at what cost? At the cost of not receiving eternal life in Jesus Christ. So we live by the law of righteousness. The Bible does says that we should obey man's law, but that's within reason. So we, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, it's not perfect. Establish justice, ensure tranquility, provide for the common defense. All that stuff is not perfect. This is why the Bible continues to give us conditions of if my people. It is contextually in the Old Testament, God was indeed talking to Solomon when he said, if my people which are called by my name. But the if is still conditional and unchanging throughout the text. All the way into the New Testament and to the better covenant, God is still saying, if you do this, I will bless you and you can have eternal life. So the if my people which are called by my name is contextually applied, yes, but you take the if out and apply it to the New Testament church. You get it? So if you're not careful, then there's a quote by Martin Luther King. He quotes someone else. A few quotes. I'll quote them at the end. But one was, the wheels of justice turn slowly, but grind exceedingly fine. Now, this is a metaphor attributed to both an ancient Greek and Chinese philosopher, acknowledges the often slow pace of attaining justice, but advises patience because eventually justice is achieved. The metaphor surely fits the long struggle to remove bias, discrimination, inequality, from the laws, processes and practices influence the entitlement to to a grant of nationality in an independence which was in Bahamas. So the wheels of justice did turn slow there. It turned slow here, but it grinds exceedingly fine. It continues to grind until one day you're going to get caught. You do the crime, you run away, but eventually you will get caught. That's what the point they're trying to make. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't always happen in an imperfect world like in Chicago, because 80% of the crimes are not even solved here. But in God's constitution, in his kingdom, all crimes you will pay, because the wheels of justice, God is slow, but it grind exceedingly fine. So like I said, I'm going to bring up this quote again, and I'm apply it here. Affirmative action saves, but it rapes. Oh, man. Affirmative action, it saves, but it rapes. Affirmative action is supposed to have been temporary. It's like the public aid system. And it's really a shame that we have to force people to consider diversity in America today. And so Ketanji Jackson, is that her name? I'm going to get her name right. Her dissent talked about race in life is different than race in the law. Powerful dissent. Powerful. But America is bipolar. You want your cake and eat it too. The Republicans hate CRT, critical race theory, even though most of them don't even know what it is, thinking that it's taught in all schools. They hate CRT because it makes them feel bad. So they're trying to erase history so they can feel good about themselves. The Democrats want equality. And how are they getting it? Part of it is discrimination, because the affirmative action actually discriminates against whites. It does, because they said you can't do it by quota, but many of the universities are still doing a quota. They just can't call it a quota. It is discriminating. It doesn't matter what you say about that. You got to define. Like y'all can't define tithe. Many of y'all saying, y'all talk about tithe. I tithe my time. You ain't tithing no time. you ain't tithing no time. I tithe this. No, you ain't tithing time. Tithing was always meant the same thing in the Bible. Always. All right. So now, Deborah, we're talking about God in heaven. They will pay, not man's law. Like I said, Chicago, 80% of the people who committed these crimes, they gone free. All right, but God is going to pay everybody who do wrong until they repent. So the Republicans hate CRT, Democrats want equality, and black people, y'all wanted desegregation, even though it hurt you. It hurts your neighborhoods. And then urban renewal came in your town. This is how we got to the place we are today. All right? So the court has changed because you changed it with your votes, or the lack thereof. Trump ended affirmative action. He did more in his 4 years than many presidents did in 4 and 8 years. He took 3 conservative judges and got rid of a lot of stuff. See, Trump himself didn't do anything that we all can look back and say, wow, that was a great thing. That was a great thing. That was a great thing, depending on who you're talking to. If you're talking to an evangelical, they'll give you a list of things that they felt benefits them. All right. But Trump didn't do a lot of stuff. He did a lot of dastardly deeds, and he did good. He did some good. You just got to go to Google and find out what he did. But he inadvertently did a lot of things that's affecting us now, and he's not even in office. It's just amazing. It's all catch-22, y'all, affirmative action. It's like the Electoral College. What's fair, it's often unfair and hurtful. So which one would you have? Which evil would you prefer to have? The Electoral College worked when the United States was young because we were young and small. We just had these colonies. It worked fine, but the United States grew through the emancipation, through the not the emancipation, but the advancement and spreading out and going westward, and through the what you call a white woman with the ghostly white woman. Okay. We expanded westward. So California is a big, huge state. And yet how do they have the same Electoral College voters as a state as small as Maine? That's like affirmative action. That is the defense against affirmative action. Look at prayer in schools. Prayer in schools was good, but yet it was bad. Prayer in schools was good, and it would have turned out to be very bad. It needed to go. Come on, James. It needed to go. I was hearing about prayer being taken out of schools because at one time you read your Bible in school and then prayer. First Bibles got taken out of school and then prayers. That was a good thing. Black people didn't see that it was good. It happened during the administration of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, for those of you who may remember it. Because if you kept prayer in schools today, guess who your children will be praying to? You looked at it as you had tunnel vision. Your mother, grandmother, and what have you had tunnel vision. They just figured, okay, keep prayer in schools so that, we can invoke God. But what God? You cannot institute prayer in a government with the type of constitution that we have, that an amendment that says freedom of speech. They ran away from Great Britain for the same thing. And then y'all pushed a religion, one true God religion in the schools. The schools are government ran. So what did you do? It's unconstitutional. It's unconstitutional because if you kept prayer in schools, your Muslim teacher would have said, all right, Elizabeth Jr., it's time to pray to Muhammad. He would have had to pray to Muhammad. And you all didn't see that. You didn't see it. Come on, Mary. So it's good. And JFK says, now that it's been erased out of school, the responsibility is on the parents. I remember when he said it. I wish I can pull it up. He said, it's now the responsibility of the parents to institute prayer in the homes. This was JFK. Got it? RK said, explain that. All right. So it's dangerous. So the ambiguity of our lives and the good versus the evil and trying to figure out which one of the two evils is good. You got to be careful, people. 1962, Bible reading and relocation of the Lord's Prayer. Yeah, there it is. Yep. And so y'all went after Marilyn. What's her name? What's the woman who was very instrumental in getting it out of there? And y'all went after her. That was a God thing. God protected our children. Well, God protected us because we were coming up in the 60s. God protected us by getting prayers out of school. Elizabeth said she said that to her children. You get it now? Yeah, you can't. You got to be careful. And I'm going to tell you why you got to be careful. All right, where am I? Okay. Karl Marx and Lenin. I'm going to try and shut this down. Karl Marx, Marxism, communism, socialism. They're all related. The Liberal Democratic Party, or the Bernie, is that his name? What's his name? Bernie? Was a socialist. He wanted socialism in America. All right. A lot of African Americans loved it. But one of the problems that I'm seeing amongst Christians and believers is that, O'Hare, Madam O'Hare, was that her name, Sharon? Is that you all only soak in certain information from certain sources that I've been saying since I've been here. You soak in certain information from your TVs. You choose what you want to hear, and when you hear from the other, if you hear from a person that you don't like, you won't hear it, even though they're telling you the truth. You won't hear it, even though they might be trying to save your life. I don't want it. It's like that poem about the man who was on the river and he was drowning. He kept begging God for save me, and then the helicopter came. He said, "No, I'm waiting on God." The lifeboat came, said, "No, I'm waiting on God." And this came, "No, I'm waiting on God." And then he drowned. Was that it? The drowning, or was he on a cliff? I can't remember. Whatever. He gets to they say the pearly gates. All jokes got a pearly gate in it. And then he asking God, "What God? I died. Why didn't you save me?" And God says, "I sent the helicopter. I sent the boat. I sent the plane. I sent this. I sent that." Right? That's Christians. He drowned. That's Christians. I sent you a lifeline and you didn't take it because you're waiting on signs and wonders. That's Christians. Came 3 times, Rosalind. That's us. So there are 2 types of laws. Again, there's man's law and there's God's law. The Constitution is not a moral law. It's a logical and practical law. And ignorance of the law is no excuse. Okay. We have amendments because the framers weren't thinking completely moral. God's law is different because it encourages man to seek righteousness. So when someone come to you and say that the framers, because I've heard even Baki, what's the pastor, the black brother who's typically very popular among white evangelical teachers, him and John MacArthur and y'all, what's his name? He said something that I was disturbed by. I like his teaching, but I was disturbed by him when he said something about that America was rooted and grounded and on Christian values, what have you. He assimilated among the evangelicals. He is a perfect example by some of the things that he say. Vadi, what's his name? I can never say his name. Is it Vadi Bakum, Elizabeth? I lived in South Dakota, okay? I'm almost there, y'all. I know we almost 2 hours in, but I did tell y'all this is going to be long tonight, okay? I lived in South Dakota, Rapid City, South Dakota, where it's a extremely Republican conservative state. And everybody had their news stations hooked on Fox, all right? There was no other conservative media other than radio and Fox. I got pulled in to that. I got pulled in to everything evangelical, to where I was losing my African American values. I was getting to a place where I was forgetting where I come from. And that town was watching only one conservative source. So they didn't know how we talked, act, how we ate, and why we worshiped the way we did, and they couldn't understand us. And I found myself assimilating with evangelicals until I moved out of town, because I was on that whole I can't stand Obama train, all that too. Now I still didn't vote for him. I don't think I still would have voted for him because I wasn't just voting for a black man. I didn't want to just vote for a black man. I wanted to vote for somebody who was going to help my family. But I was getting pulled into all, and I was assimilating with them until I moved away, and then I woke up and said, "Oh my God, I had no identity." And they had to say, "Are they black folks in South Dakota?" Well, yeah, I was there. Yeah, I was being indoctrinated. Yeah, there's a lot of black people there only because it's a military base there. That's the only reason why black people are there. Military. If it's not military, you would have never seen any black people in South Dakota. And then they left the military and they started their families there. A lot of interracial marriages there. You know, while they're there, if you're there on base and you start falling in love, all right, and then you're done with the military, but then you stay. That's why black people are there that are non-military. These are the children of past military. Anyway, so I began to assimilate with them. So I'm telling you all, you got to be careful because you're going to find yourself getting pulled into something and you don't even know how you got there. So I'm saying that the SCOTUS has one job, and that job is not a moral job. It is a political job. Their job is to interpret the law and not govern based off of their moral defenses. This is why Justice Jackson could not define. No, because this is why she would not define what a woman was, because she was speaking to millions of people who needed her up there to represent her on the minority bench, even though she knew what a woman was. So I'm saying all of this, y'all, to talk about the Soviets, the Soviet Union. You all in America, including myself, are part of a system that was set up by the Soviet Union, and they look over at us and they say, we got them. America will implode, yes, but other nations, China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and some of the other Muslim nations will defeat us without throwing one rock or launching one missile. Can y'all tell me how they're going to defeat us? It's all in the plan. It's a brilliant plan, and it has been working for hundreds of years. It's a brilliant plan. And to the point where they're saying, my God, this plan works better than we thought it would. Especially now with AI and prior to AI with just the internet. That internet almost synced us. If we didn't have the intelligence that we have in government, it almost synced us because they went into your phone and in your laptop and your desktop. They all up in your TikTok too. And they made sure they meddled in y'all's election and in everything. They did meddle because they know division, technology, all this. They don't have to launch not one missile. A house divided, come on, in itself cannot stand. It's working. And it's working on Christians, especially. Your own government got you in the center of their hands. 501c3 was one of the greatest manipulative plans for the church. The Soviet came up with a phrase called ideological subversion. Google it one day. Ideological subversion. I'm going to quote from a man from the Soviet Union. This aired, I don't know, maybe back in the 50s or 60s. I was watching a movie and I heard this quote and I thought I'd write it down. Here is ideological subversion. And you tell me if this is America. Here's what the man said. To change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent In spite of the abundance of information that's available, the internet, Google, all these books and libraries, in spite of all the abundance of information we got, no one is able to come to a sensible conclusion. In the interest of defending themselves and their families, their community, and their country, it's a great brainwashing process that goes very slow. Schools were set up by communities and churches and families. Little House on the Prairie. It wasn't a government school. It was the community set that up to train and teach. It was not until the government got involved into the business of schooling and education. In walked ideological subversion. The church has done the same thing to us. They said it takes 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. So Marxism, Leninism ideology is being pumped into the heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americans. Your basic values that you once lived on, my dear told you, this is right. Now what she told you was right is wrong. That's why a lot of women are undressing now. I got in trouble for doing that show. Y'all told me don't police women's bodies. And so then y'all said, look at all this. Look at this. This is a shame. Well, y'all told us to don't police them. Leave them alone. They walk. I turn on Facebook and all these values of decency is thrown out now. Why? Ideological subversion. And the church is being, y'all getting shot in the arm with that. Half-baked intellectuals are now occupying the positions of power in government. I'm still quoting y'all. Half-baked intellectuals are occupying the positions of power in government, in civic service, and in business, mass media, and the educational system. These people you voted in, and they barely got out of high school. But because they became millionaires and billionaires, he's our guy. Donald Trump says, I know nothing about politics. He's our guy. You are stuck with them, they said. They are contaminated and programmed to think and react to certain stimuli in a certain pattern. You're robots. When you get a chance, watch a Twilight episode called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Drive or Maple Avenue. The Monsters Are Due on Maple Avenue. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Twilight Zone. They updated it years later. The monsters are due on Maple Avenue. I'll continue to quote. They end by saying, the facts tells him nothing. The facts tells him nothing. They are under this illusion. The facts tell a lot of you nothing. Nothing. Even if I shower him with authentic proof and pictures, even if I take him to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camps, he will refuse to believe it until somebody whips his behind. This is a quote. The United States is in a state of war, they said, but it's undeclared war. This war is against the basic principles and foundations of this system. What system is this? Ideological subversion. When you hear an evangelical say there is no global warming, ideological. When you hear a woman say that I'm both pro-life and pro-choice, ideological subversion. When you hear the church say that if you don't tithe, there's going to be holes in your bags and God's going to explode, your engine going to explode and you're going to lose your job and your life's going to get cut off. Ideological subversion. And you don't even know it. You in the house and the house is on fire. Your cognitive dissonance is going to kill you one day. I'm a woman trapped in a man's body. Yes. To the point where one of these states are going to start punishing the parents for not helping a 7-year-old trans over to a sex that was not, he or she was not born with, assigned. What state is that, y'all? I saw it in the news. They're trying to pass a law to put parents in jail for not listening to a child. They call it child abuse. Is it California? Child abuse. Why? What is that called, y'all? Y'all should know by now. I said it several times. What's it called? Ideological subversion. So, you want a Harvard degree that bad, huh? I'm going to say something and I close this down. I was talking to my friends in the inbox message, and we were talking about that, and we were saying the same thing at the same time. Why would I want to be with somebody who don't want to be with me? If you don't want me, why would I be trying to force myself into your institution? Why? When my wife filed for divorce, as much as I was trying to get her back, as much as I was trying to wine and dine my wife because I was falling in love with her, it was too late after all those years. All of a sudden, I'm trying to fall in love with my wife. When she showed me and proved that she didn't want me no more, and them divorce papers came to me, and I looked at them divorce papers after I done wiped my eyes and all that stuff. And at the bottom it says, you can contest it if you like, call this number and we can go through that process of contesting it, and you know, or if you don't want to contest it, leave this document alone and it will go through with or without you. It was that bottom line. I says, I'm going to leave this paper alone. Because I woke up one morning after sobbing and slipping into depression. I woke up and said, why would I want to contest this? Why would I want to be with somebody who obviously is spending a lot of time and money not wanting to be with me? Yes, then. Of course, I feel. Come on. Why? So as it pertains to affirmative action, why would I want to be banging on Harvard's door and Yale's door when I know you don't even want me? There's too many institutions out there that would love to have me. I'm in one right now. It's called Moody Bible Institute. Come on. It hurts the righteous person. I like that, man. So let me quote from Martin Luther King. It's one of my favorite speeches of all time. After his "I Have a Dream" speech, he gave this speech at Grosse Pointe High School, March 14th, 1968. It's turning out to be my favorite speech from him outside of the March on Washington speech. When I hear it, I get inspired, but I don't really need the we shall overcome part. Hear me. I don't need the we shall overcome part. full disclosure. This is a black man who has built a business. I quit corporate America in 1997, and I vowed to the Lord I will never punch another clock. You understand? I struggled, I suffered, lights turned off, gas turned off, everything. I went through hell, and I finally got it right. So I make my own money. All right? It gets difficult some months, because if I get sick or if I'm too tired, if I don't work, I don't eat. So I can't take vacations. I don't have sick pay, and I don't have all that stuff. I have to work by the sweat of my brow, all right, to survive. So YouTube has been a blessing to me, but y'all know lately I haven't been going live. I used to go live every day, faithfully, every day, 7 days a week, but I don't go live that much because of school. So more money is leaving my pocket than coming in. So when I don't go live, that's missed money. That's money I don't get. The bunkers have been an extreme blessing to me. The bunkers is keeping myself and baby girl and my grandsons alive. You all have been keeping us alive. Mm-hmm. My other efforts is my books. You know, I have several books that are out there. That's how I survive. I survive by doing counseling sessions. I survive through my music, my writing. I have to have different streams in order for me to survive, to pay a light and a gas bill, and thank God I paid my car off. Other than that, man, that thing was high. All right. So the we shall overcome part, that's not me. I don't need the white man to do anything for me. I don't need to assimilate. I don't need to have all of the things that he produced and created. I don't need to work on his job. That's me. Understand? So when I hear civil rights and we shall overcome, praise God, thank God. If this is what y'all want, then y'all can go and march out there with Black Lives Matter and all this other stuff. Go and do what you need to do. That ain't my game. I don't want a we shall overcome. Because everything I have, the Lord has given it to me. I wasn't relying on some Caucasian man to give it to me. You understand? So I'm saying all that before I say this speech, because some of the speech don't apply to me. It don't apply to me. Mm-hmm. All right? And Martin Luther King was not a perfect man. I know some of y'all don't like him. He was not perfect. I never met a man that was perfect. So that's why I say, there's sometimes I watch Fox News and I say, that is so true. Wow, that's so true. Sometimes I watch Candace Owens and say, that girl, she preach it right there. That is so true. That is so true, Candace. And then the other 80% of it, I have to turn it off because it's Candace. I listen to Thomas Sowell, who is a brilliant economist, and he says a lot of things that make a lot of sense, but some things I can't hear. Larry Elder, brilliant man, brilliant, but there's a lot of things I can't hear. Why? Because some of these men and women come up differently than I did. They got a leg up. Affirmative action helped them. And like the justice we were talking about, they forgot what color they were. And now they're in this world where they're trying to erase colorism. They're trying to erase it. But you need to see that I'm black. You got to see it so that you know how to talk to me. I don't need your freedoms. I'm already free. I'm already free. So I listen to black conservatives with my eyes wide open. I listen to them and they make a lot of great points. Go watch Uncle Tom, the Uncle Tom movie, version 1 and version 2. It's on Amazon Prime. It's a brilliant movie. The problem is there's some things in there that I know based off of black people who had a leg up, so they can't talk against the status quo. This is why a lot of the black conservatives have white wives. The black female conservatives have white husbands. This is one proof why. If I stayed in South Dakota and started to date again, I actually did. I dated a white woman in South Dakota. I did. Why? Because I was assimilating. I dated 2 white women in South Dakota. It was short. It was like this. It was like this. But that's where you are. Okay. So here's the quote. Grosse Pointe High School, March 14, 1968. I know it's late, you all on the East Coast. It's almost 12:30. And so my apologies, but I told y'all at the beginning of the show that I'm going long. We are going to win our freedom because both the sacred heritage of our nation and the eternal will of the Almighty God are embodied in our echoing demands. So however difficult it is during this period, however difficult it is to continue to live with the agony and the continued existence of racism, however difficult it is to live amongst the constant hurt, the constant insult, and the constant disrespect, I can still sing, "We shall overcome." We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That last part is where it starts to apply to me. That first part was the fluff that you all needed, and they needed it in 1968. I don't need that first part. We shall overcome because Carlyle is right. No lie can live forever. We shall overcome because William Cullen Bryant is right. Truth crushed to the ground will rise again. He said we shall overcome because James Russell Lowell is right. Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yet that scaffold sways the future. We shall overcome because the Bible is right. You shall reap what you sow. See, that apply to me. With this faith, he says, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. Here's what he encourages all you all. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when all of God's children all over the nation, black men and white men, Jew and Gentile, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing the words of this old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we're free at last. That last part, that was for you. I don't need to hold hands with all these other races and say free at last. I am free in the Lord. I have great liberty there, and I don't need man to free me. I've always been free. Free to roam among the captain, like whatever airline that is. It's a great speech for those of you in whom it applies. All right? But I need you all to know that you can pull yourself up by your own bootstraps and produce. Do whatever you can to raise your children in the fear and admonition of the Lord so that they can respect you as well. Teach them generational wealth so that you're able to transfer it down to them. So when they give up age, they'll have something so they can transfer down to their generation as well. You don't need to be crying systematic racism, covert, overt discrimination, all that stuff. You ain't got to cry. All that. I just didn't hear all that in my father's house. We knew it existed, but my father didn't wake up every morning crying about the white man. He got his hammer and some nails and a tool belt, and he went to work and he built his wealth from the sweat of his hands. And I benefit from that today. You understand? My children are going to benefit from all of the things that I'm doing today. Everything that I've produced will belong to my children, and I'm teaching them how to hold on to it. See, it's There's a difference between being rich and wealthy. Rich people can lose it all. Wealthy people never lose. Because wealth is rooted deep. It's called old money. When I lived in South Dakota, that was old money. And whenever a baby was born, that baby was born in wealth. It wasn't born rich. It was born in wealth. Generation after generation. No matter what they did, that kid was going to be wealthy for the rest of their lives. That is what we need to teach each other. You're going to be wealthy. You're going to fail over here. You're going to fall over here. You're going to bump your head, but you keep bumping your head as a wealthy person. And you don't even know, man, I'm wealthy and I can't even get rid of this wealth. I can't get rid of it. You will always be wealthy because it's up here. It's a mental construct. Wealth doesn't mean you got millions of dollars. I'm sorry to tell you that. No. All right, y'all, I gotta go. I've worked y'all's. I upset the liberals a lot. And then when I get conservatives on my side, I say, I like him. And then I'll turn on the conservatives and they're like, oh, I hate his guts. Why? Because I believe in being as balanced as possible so that we won't be on a teeter-totter. Okay? Let's get on the ground, you all, and build this thing together. All right, God, I love you. I praise your name for what you've done. The people are here. We're excited that the people of God stayed long enough, went longer than usual, but I don't plan on revisiting this affirmative action. Not like this, I won't. I might speak of it in passing. But God, I thank you for giving all those African Americans the opportunity to go to those Ivy Leagues and graduate and become amazing citizens and to create policies for us to protect us and to help us become a superpower. So God, I thank you for the opportunity, but it's gone now. Now they got to lean on you and all of these other institutions that can help them free their minds. So bless you, oh God. We bless you when we go out. We bless you when we come in. We bless you when we go to bed at night. We bless you when we wake up. When we go into the community, God, we bless you. These people here bless you as well. Thank you for your power. Thank you for your blood, oh God. Thank you for your Holy Ghost. Thank you for your strength. We don't take it for granted. We thank you. And we'll continue to do that until the day we take our last breath. We love you. We give your name the praise in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, y'all. Sunday School University is not this week because y'all know that's the 4th of July. If you show up on the 4th of July on Zoom, you're going to be there by yourself. We will be in session the following Tuesday. All right. The following Tuesday, which is July the 11th, is Sunday School University. All right, we're going to try to figure out how to find a thesis statement in the Bible. Okay, y'all, I'm practicing on y'all. You're going to get a whole lot of Moody Bibles in these next few months, few years. Take care of yourselves and one another. I'm going upstairs to eat real late because I can do it. I can do it. I don't always do it, but because I didn't have dinner, I'm going to do it. I love y'all. Take care. And thank y'all for the happy birthday wishes. Oh. These are all of the letters, not all of them. These are some of the letters from the bunkers. It's a whole lot of letters and cards and some checks in here too. Thank you, bunkers. I asked the bunkers to write me some letters to encourage me in school. And man, boy, did they come in. Thank you, bunkers. The moderators will put my P.O. box there. If you're on YouTube, the P.O. box is in the description below. P.O. Box 28827, Chicago, Illinois 60628. All right? Keep sending the cards and letters. I open them every day and read them. Y'all are such an encouragement to me. All right, I love y'all. I holla.
Women That Men Desire by Sirwalterj Jones is a women's guide to men. The authors endeavor to expose men fundamentally with his perspective on the types of women that men truly desire. He has meticulously penned a brilliant and controversial read, bold in its assertion that all women fall into one of 4 categories. Girl A, the side chick. Girl B, the mistress. Girl C, his soulmate. Or Girl D, his fatal attraction. And when a woman walks into a room, her category is showing. The 4 Women That Men Desire is funny, informative, and enlightening. It is a quick read and a must-have for your library. Head over to Amazon.com for your copy.
It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
Sirwalterj Jones Show. Goodbye.